Welcome to Excel in Case Interviews, and this video is discussing some of the practice activities that you can do on your own without a partner, and the focus is on a practice topic called brainstorming. My name is Pam Schilling. I'm the CEO and career strategist with Arch Career Partners. I have a background in strategy consulting and also many years in the technology industry working within the finance organization. I now work with all kinds of professionals who are targeting the most elite and selective hiring organizations, including consulting firms. I also have a particular specialty in preparing for case interviews. There's a lot of different practice activities and ways that you can prepare for case interviews. There's many things that you can be doing on your own without a partner, and these are often crucial to helping you really elevate the way that you perform in a case interview. Our video now focuses on brainstorming, and we'll talk a little bit about how this is used in the case interview and how you can practice. This particular activity can be useful in a variety of ways. So why is it important? Well, one of the things that we try to do when we develop our thinking about a case is to be comprehensively exhaustive. We use the term MECE when we discuss structures, but in general, our overall thinking needs to be comprehensively exhaustive. Another area that's also assessed in the case interview is creativity. Brainstorming is a way to show your creativity, to be able to think about what is typical, but also maybe a little bit more out of the box. Another place that brainstorming tests is your ability to be structured or to show your organization. And brainstorming is just not a laundry list of things that you're throwing out randomly, but there should be some organizing mechanism or categorization or prioritization behind your brainstorming. And one of the things to keep in mind is that some firms, as a matter of method in their case interview, will specifically ask you to do a brainstorm. Other interviews that maybe don't ask that directly, it can be very, very valuable to proactively do some type of a brainstorm somewhere in the case, if not in multiple places. So, is brainstorming difficult? Well, it just depends. It depends a little bit if you practice, and when you don't, anything can be difficult. It can come to you with a little bit of a surprise. And if it's something that you haven't done a lot of in your prior work, just given the nature of it, it may not be something that you're as familiar with. And finally, if your business acumen is a little bit limited, it can be challenging to brainstorm the topics of the cases because they are wrapped around maybe some core business issues. So practice can certainly help with these things. There's a lot of resources that I recommend to help with brainstorming. You can find different types of problems in some of the consulting expert books and the consulting club case books. Those can be found online. You can also take some of the activities in Rocket Blocks and build brainstorming questions off of that. And then one of the things that I think is tremendously valuable is just to be interested and open through reading and podcast and those sorts of things to different business articles and topics and matters, because the more that you learn, the more foundation you have to think through the types of things that will come up in a brainstorming situation. And really, anything can be a brainstorming question. So, a little bit on how to actually do a brainstorming activity. There's nothing really all that complicated here, but let's think a little bit about your goals when you're doing brainstorming. So, number one, you want to be MECE. This is another area to be comprehensive and to make sure that the kinds of things that you're talking about, you don't have too much concentration in one area or one dimension. Also, try to have a nice, robust list of things in your brainstorm. Some people will come up with 2 or 3 items. That's just not enough. Think about 8, 10 items, and in your practice, maybe even push yourself to 12 to 15 items. Also, be creative. So I would expect you to have a couple of things that pretty much everybody thinks about or has brought up in the case, but to really succeed and stand out, you've got to have a couple of ideas that you're the only one that's brought those up during the day. I would also recommend practicing different types of brainstorming. So it could be the information that you might need or that you might want to get from a client. It could be a variety of considerations given the matter or the issue of the case. It could be drivers or reasons. Why is profitability declining? Why is market share decreasing? Why do we have employee turnover? That could be a great brainstorming activity. It could be a set of options, it could be methods to improve or grow. So, practice a variety of different types of brainstorming. And then in your practice, be intentional. Say to the interviewer, hey, I'm going to do a brainstorm. Let me throw out a few ideas because I want to practice this technique. So do it intentionally, and then as it makes sense during your case interviews, you'll be able to do so comfortably. So, what I'm going to do now is illustrate a couple of brainstorming questions. I'm going to walk through three problems. I'm going to share the background or the prompt, and then I encourage you to work the brainstorm. Pause the video, and then once you've put together your list of items, go through and listen to my review, my brainstorming list, and then do a little bit of a compare and contrast. Now, of course, the solutions that I provide here in my brainstorming list are not going to be comprehensive. But what you can do is try to check that you've got internal factors and external factors, and do you have different areas of the business considered? So if your brainstorm is too concentrated around one area, that means that you're not comprehensive enough. Then you can also ask yourself, is your brainstorm organized? Okay, let's look at the first scenario. This is the call to Hollywood. Let me share the situation. So recently, the Hollywood News reported that actor Mark Wahlberg had lunch with NFL football player Rob Gronkowski. That's NFL, which is American football. For those of you that know Mark Wahlberg, he needs no explanation. But if you're not as familiar with his work, he's a fairly famous film actor. He's been in a variety of movies, including Boogie Nights, Ted, The Fighter, The Departed, and now he's a very successful film director. Again, those of you that know Rob Gronkowski, he needs no explanation. But if you're not as familiar, he's a very successful and Super Bowl winning tight end for the New England Patriots, which is one of the most highly successful football teams, probably of this generation and of NFL in general. During that lunch meeting, Mark told Rob that he would hire him immediately for a new film that he's making, and that overall he has a great future as an action film actor. So this would be akin to someone like The Rock or Vin Diesel. So if you're advising Rob Gronkowski, what would be all the considerations that he might want to think about if he were to evaluate retiring from football to go into the movies? Okay, so take a few minutes, pause the video, and come up with your list. And in doing so, think about 8 to 10 items. And if you're just beginning brainstorming, don't worry so much about organizing the list at this stage. But if you're a little bit more in the comfort zone of getting a lot of items on your brainstorm list, then start to find ways to organize your list so that it has some type of structure to it. When you're ready, press play. So let me review a few of the things that I was thinking about as it relates to Rob Gronkowski. So some of the considerations that I would advise him. So one would be, what's his current salary that he's making on his contract, and what are the terms of that contract? I'd want to understand his present and near-term future financial opportunity. Then I'd also want to think about the winning prospects of his current team. As I mentioned, the New England Patriots is a very successful team. Is that likely to continue in the future? Also, with professional athletes, there's the chance that you could be traded to another team. Is that something that Gronkowski would face? And if so, what might those future contracts look like? In addition, and this all relates to some of the financial considerations, does he have endorsements as a football player? Is he sponsored by any particular brand, or is he the spokesperson for a product? And if so, what's the financial opportunity and how might that change if he's a movie actor. Another category is in the area of risk and health. So, football is a very aggressive sport. There's a lot of risk of injury. Rob Gronkowski has actually had a lot of injuries. If you don't know football, that might not be something that you would be expected to know. But in the short term and the long term, there can be some fairly serious consequences. And so, could he sustain an injury that would end his career early? And then, over the long run, what would be some of the long term health considerations that he might want to think about? Then we would move into the scenario of what is it going to be like to be an actor? Not only would he want to do this one movie with Mark Wahlberg, what would be his future potential? And so, could he only do action films? Could he do other types of films? Not only could we think about that, but we could think about the other potential salary areas, not just movies, but other types of income. Maybe he starts a product like a lot of movie actors do, and so estimating some of that and forecasting it. Moving into the acting realm, there could also be some risks. So it could be that some of his movies are not successful, he isn't as sought out, maybe there's some PR that impacts his reputation. And so what would potentially be the risks on the side if he steps into the acting arena? And then finally, one of the things I would think about is just in general his professional goals. Is he still excited about football? Does he define himself as a football player? Does he see his post playing days in football, perhaps as a coach or a broadcaster? And then how would those fit with acting? Could he do acting in some other way, maybe part time versus full time? So those would be some of the thoughts, some of the initial brainstorm. And again, I would think that you could potentially have other items, but think about your organization, your comprehensiveness, and is there some alignment to some of the things that I've discussed here? Let's look at our second problem. We're talking to a client who is an office supplies retailer, and they focus on the geography of the Midwest of the United States. The company currently serves a particular segment, and that is large businesses and major corporations. Their revenue for the last several quarters has been flat, and the client is figuring out ways to stimulate growth. So the question is, what ideas would you have to drive new growth? So please take a few minutes to think about this. You might like to pause the video here and again come up with 8 to 10 items. And if you are feeling more comfortable with the brainstorming, try to structure those items or organize them in some way. When you're ready, restart the video. So thinking about our client's interest in growing, there's a variety of different opportunities or options that we can consider. So starting with volume discounts. So we could go to our existing base of customers and create some incentives for them to purchase more. In the same token, with our current and potentially new customers, we could offer a loyalty program that rewards them for continuing to purchase and to consolidate their purchasing. We could potentially also lower our prices and offer discounts that would then drive more volume. And we could add products and other categories like coffee or other types of supplies, furniture, those sorts of things, expanding our portfolio that would appeal to our current customers as well as potentially new customers. Another area that could be interesting is to create some differentiation, to do some R&D that maybe we could come up with some exclusive products. Maybe we have a particular type of pen that nobody else manufactures. So those could all be concentrated around our new customers and driving additional revenue and volume. And then potentially we could expand our customer base. So we could add small to medium businesses. We could go out and we could find new large business customers that are maybe with one of our competitors. We could pursue new sales channels. Maybe our business is very catalog oriented and we could focus more on the online channel. We could potentially increase our advertising to stimulate interest from new customers. And then finally, we could potentially create some partnerships. So we could work with other types of business to business organizations that we bundle our offerings, maybe group purchasing organizations, those types of things. So again, we've got a variety of things that deal with our existing customers and new customers, and then maybe push the boundaries of some of our ideas into new things that aren't so typical for the organization. So as you review this, again, think about comprehensiveness, creativity, a little bit of organization. So our third and final example, let's take a look at this situation. The city of Chicago has offered to give our client, who is a famous hotelier, a plot of land that's located between the South Loop and Hyde Park. If you're not familiar with Chicago, that's a revitalizing area. It's also along the lake, so it makes the geography very beautiful. And it bridges the kind of south end of downtown and the Hyde Park campus, which is where one of the universities, the University of Chicago, sits. The city has an interest in doing this because they have targeted this as a key area of economic development, and they think that a cool hotel would be one of the sparks that that neighborhood needs, and that the hotel would then bring in other types of businesses, retail and grocery and services. They have given the hotel, the hotelier, a proposal where they could build the hotel and then they would keep the profits. They would have no obligation back to the city other than the typical taxes and so forth. The size of the land would allow for a 400-room hotel to be built, and it could be definitely less than that, but it certainly couldn't be any bigger. So, given this background, what would our client, the hotelier, need to know to determine if they should build this hotel? So, this question is really a brainstorm around information needs. So, please take a couple minutes to think through and identify your list of information needs. Please pause the video, and when you're ready, push play and hear the discussion of the hotel needs for information. So, in order to assess if the hotelier should build on this plot of land that the city of Chicago would be granting, there's likely some additional information that would need to be gathered. So, here's a few ideas. So, one would be the competition. What are the other nearby hotels and any other plans for future hotels? There might be zoning requirements, there might have been permits filed, so that should be pretty easily attainable. Another question might be the type of customers. Given this geography, given where people would be going and the purpose for them to come and stay in the hotel, that would be important to understand. The hotel would also want to estimate their occupancy rates. So they could benchmark against other occupancy rates in the area, their other hotels, and just make sure that they have a really good forecast for this particular area and also the timeline. Given that it's an undeveloped area, they may want to look at other hotels that have done similar type of projects just to get a sense of at what level does the occupancy rate rise along what timeline. For sure, they would want to get some cost information. So the first cost would be actually building the hotel, the construction costs, and the other area of cost would be the ongoing operation, things like labor, maintenance, services, those sorts of things. They could also think about what sort of events going on in the city and also in that neighborhood might stimulate people wanting to stay in the hotel. Are there conferences? Are there university activities? Is it a tourist location that would be of interest? Are there concerts going on, sporting events, that sort of thing? So by doing that, they would also be able to understand their peaks and valleys in their occupancy rates. Another thing that they may want to think about trying to get information on, and maybe this is through a focus group, is what particular features are necessary. Do they need to have a spa? Do they need to have a pool? It's Chicago, so the winters are very cold, so a pool might make sense, but it would have to be indoor. Is that something that people really are interested in when they're seeking out a hotel? Do they need to have a restaurant? If so, what kind of a restaurant? And does it need to be a unique restaurant or a chain restaurant? So, all that could be helpful in thinking about what the restaurant business would be in addition to the hotel business, the services like spas, but as well as filling up kind of the demand for the hotel, the core occupancy. Another consideration and piece of information that would be useful is just the style and the decor of the hotel. What's the architecture going to look like? What's the interior going to look like? And so the client might want to get some competitive information about the types of hotels in Chicago, that area, some of the key trends, and also what they've been doing in their hotel footprint. Another consideration might be pricing and what makes sense. And then finally, what are the goals? What are the overall business objectives for this hotelier? Are they looking to expand? Are they looking to be in Chicago? Do they have other hotels in Chicago? Does this fit into their footprint? Are they interested in revitalizing neighborhoods? Is that one of their goals? Do they have a social purpose? So, all this information could be useful in helping them evaluate if it makes sense to build on this plot of land. So, again, when you're looking at your brainstorm list, don't think about the specifics, but just think about the categories of ideas. Are they organized? Do you have a lot of breadth? Are they covering some of the same topics, even though they might not be stated exactly the same? So do that assessment and then go back through and think about where are some of the strengths of your brainstorm and build on those, but then also where do you have some things that you could do some additional research and preparation. And that's the feedback process. And that's one of the key things that comes up again and again. Once you practice really sitting down and spending as much time reviewing your feedback as you did to work the case question in general. And then what do you do with that feedback? So, do you do more drills? So, in the case of brainstorming, do you keep working at it? Or is there another gap? So, is it maybe something where you're not as familiar with the industry and therefore it limited your brainstorm? Is it because your business acumen is a little bit lower and then, maybe it's just useful to do some broad business review, whether it's podcast, Wall Street Journal articles, reading Fast Company, other sorts of things that are just going to help you create some ideas in your minds that are drawing upon other pieces of information. That's probably one of the toughest things when it comes to brainstorming is where do you go to? How do you get better at brainstorming? My take is I think you get better by practicing and then you get better by listening. So brainstorming comes from a place of great curiosity and interest. And people who are curious and interested, they just do a lot of listening and learning and intaking a variety of information. And even though you have limited time, you can find ways to do that efficiently. So, with this, let's talk about how you put this into practice. Find some of the case books. If you're finding them online, great. If you have to purchase them, that's an option as well. Identify 3 to 6 cases. Read through them. Make sure that you can find some cases that maybe have a brainstorm included. That's just going to be helpful. But if it doesn't have a brainstorm, that's okay. You can make it up. Do 3 cases in a row. Brainstorm a question for each one of them, or maybe 2 questions for each one of them. And then if you happen to have a case solution, go back and review that. If not, one of the other ways is to review with a partner. So give a peer or a practice partner the same question and the two of you work it together and then compare your brainstorms and then also after the fact try to think of a few more ideas. Then you can go through and do your study and review maybe what it is that you need to focus on. So, do you have some industry knowledge that you can build, some knowledge of functional areas like marketing or finance or strategy or operations? Are there certain key trends that maybe you're not as familiar with? food trends, social media trends, those sorts of things. So, really think about where you can hone your attention and identify one or two areas after each round of practice. So, this has been a discussion of brainstorming as a key practice activity, which you can do individually in between your partner practice or as a precursor to your partner practice. I hope you've enjoyed, and please check out the additional case practice videos, and good luck.